Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Mindset Nebula, where we talk SAP, design, tech, and pretty much anything else that's interesting to us. So today we have a very interesting discussion teed up with our guests around the topic of sustainability. One of the biggest key messages that came out of Sapphire earlier this year was really this huge focus on sustainability from Krishnapillai. Slowly over the year, SAP has started to roll some of their thoughts and leadership out in this space. And so today we really wanted to talk about this entire program. We wanted to talk about it from the SAP perspective. We also wanted to talk about it from the industry perspective. So join us on the podcast today are three experts who are really going to lead this discussion around how important this topic area is, not only now, but in the years to come. So with that, first up, our guest for today, we have David Krishnapillai. David is currently the Director of Operations for Grand Prix Graphics in Asia. One of David's key focus areas is really bringing visibility into the sustainability initiatives of packaging production companies. Welcome, David. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing great. It's gonna be a nice chat today. Next up, we are joined by Emete Tonukari. Emete currently serves as the project manager of outsourcing in Nigerian breweries. And she has the responsibility to deploy good governance in human rights and social sustainability for both internal and external employees in line with the United Nations Global Compact for business and human rights. Emete, great to have you here today.
Yeah, good to be here too. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Last up, but certainly not least, is Edmund Manrique. Edmund is Mindset's internal sustainability guru and principal architect. Edmund has also been a professor in the information systems and analytics throughout his long SAP career. Edmund, this is actually your first time on the podcast. Welcome. How'd you get by this long without joining us for one of these?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we have three very esteemed guests here today, and just to give a little bit of a background on each person here, I wanted to give you all just a couple minutes and kind of go through your background and your focus within the sustainability topic area. So anybody who wants to kick it off, go ahead and give a quick introduction. How about David?
All right. Yeah, so my formal training was in engineering, electrical and electronics to be precise, and started in software. And this was back in the days, if you can believe such a time, software was not the hyped up thing. Hardware engineers were the real heroes in most companies. So I kind of accidentally went into printing when a printing company here has just invested in computer system, because this was the time when the graphics for printing was getting computerized, and got stuck there. But having said that, I also then parallelly worked in other areas in healthcare, imaging, print production, and so on. So it has been a long journey. So I would say primarily my focus is on applying engineering methods, techniques for solutions with a solid IT skill set. So it's interesting, I went into this printing industry because it was getting computerized and I had the skills. And that's what I see in most other industries. Computers used to be that afterthought in many or the sidekick for many industries who thought that, there is that room that with those few people, but it has now come to take center stage. So
especially in the manufacturing space, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Very cool. Emete?
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan. So about me, I started my career as a business and administration specialist. I'm working in the sales division, and I got into sustainability about, let's say 10 to 12 years ago. First, looking at more of an environment and climate, and a bit of community. But for the past 3 years now, I've focused more on sustainable social sustainability, looking at work conditions and human rights for workers in general. Sustainability, as we speak, is such a very big topic. It has so many pillars, so it's something interesting. And every individual can play a role in ensuring that we make the world a better place. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then Edmund.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for having me. And again, just kind of reaching out to David and Emete. I think in their quick introductions of kind of underpinning their backgrounds. I mean, I know David was a former COO, long time in the industry, implementing SAP and being responsible for the operations of the organization. So we'll definitely keen from some of those experiences and kind of leveraging that into the SAP and sustainability world. And, you know, Emete, your comment of just such a global big challenge across for everyone. You know, I know with you Nigerian breweries, or I guess you're the breweries of Heineken as well. Also, you know, an SAP shop to a certain degree as well, and a lot of, you know, kind of global recognition to some of the challenges there. So again, thank you. But yeah, a little bit about my background. You know, I was you know, in the you know, SAP space for going on 3 decades. You know, I started, you know, the SAP world in SAP Germany and Waldorf, originally as an R2 consultant and back in the mainframe. So it was all very, you know, technology. So I became a financials consultant. So a lot of the focus was part of the SAP Platinum Consulting Group in the US. And part of those challenges was just really, you know, being an advisor to many of the very first accounts out there. And then, you know, really did a lot of implementations, full cycle implementations, moved from the financials realm into basically the analytics side. So a lot of my work in finance has been around reporting analytics, product costing, profitability analysis. So that was a natural kind of movement, you know, I would say towards the late 90s when data warehouse was coming out there. So I focused really my next decade or so into the business intelligence, business analytics world, enterprise performance planning and forecasting. And then really, I would say for the last, you know, close to decade or so, doing a lot more roadmap strategy work in the SAP space. So again, trying to create the value proposition to first and foremost, why should you implement certain tools? What kind of capabilities you need to, and what's the value for putting that and helping quantify that? And then ultimately, you know, as S4 HANA and HANA got released, I was lucky to be part of some of the very first implementations of HANA and S4 for that matter. So really went back into the product and did some of the very first implementations in S4. So that's going back to 2015. So really worked through different iterations of S4. But where does that kind of come into play when you know I joined Mindset? It was a really nice Mindset was really focused around the customer experience, usability aspects. So where sustainability kind of comes in place, it really is very pervasive, as Emete mentioned. So we created a task force to really focus around sustainability and how does that work, and the value proposition of, you know, implementing solutions, but at the same time, how to embed sustainability measures into that. So, you know, we've been doing quite a bit of research as well as conversations with a lot of different customers to get some mindset into space and see how we can help and try to figure our focus. So again, my background came from, you know, the tools, as Jonathan mentioned. You know, I've been a professor for a couple of decades as well, kind of teaching focused around data and data analytics. And again, just trying to parlay both kind of the enterprise world, the data world, and then how to embed the sustainability aspects to really hopefully make a difference. So again, I'm excited to take on some of this challenge and help where I can.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, we have a lot of topics to really try to get into today. And I think, from some of what you said, Edmund, was really where our, mindset sustainability focus really sets the stage. And that is, we look at SAP just from an overall business perspective. I think they tout that almost 70% of the world's business transactions get transacted through SAP. And so there's, whether that's raw materials and getting into the manufacturing space that David is really a part of, whether that's more of a global human rights perspective from an HR perspective, where Emete really focuses in on. I think, as part of the program and part of the research that you've been doing, Edmund, it's really trying to see where we can fit the best and where we can help our people and customers really make sure that this is a focus area. And so just wanted to bring up, I think, as a research point for you, Edmund, and I think Emete, you had joined as well. But there was a UN event just a couple of weeks ago that really focused all around sustainability. Talk about kind of what the focus was there and what you kind of learned out of that event.
Okay, great question. For me, the UN event I think it was very good that it happened at that time, because we had speakers, head of government, and several corporate executives attend the session, and a lot of things was discussed. Top of mind, what came to me was that it gave us the platform to establish our commitment towards our climate goals, as well as our SDG goals. So, for example, the Africa strategy was launched. And there was also a lot of talk with respect to gender and inclusion, and the which focused on the LGBTQ plus community. And a reporting tool was launched that companies could use as a guide to access themselves and also support their process into fostering inclusion. And for me, my personal takeout was with respect to the commitment made by the heads of government towards putting in policies and procedures in their countries to support climate actions. And this is very important as we go into the COP26 discussions later in the year. Thank you.
Yeah, no, just to add to that, I mean, it was such a fantastic event. I was really, being an attendee or participant at the United Nations kind of climate event that, was tagged with the overall launch of the United Nations quarterly event. You're starting out with these heads of states. I'm just a fly in the wall and kind of hearing this global drive of where do we need to happen, or what do we need to where do we need to go to make some difference. On the flip side, I again just trying to put my accounting hat in there. There's some very, very specific facts out there, and there's $120 billion chain reaction that can happen by 2026 if companies and organizations don't focus on it. That's the cost of where every day happens there. And then at the same time, when we look at the trillions of dollars of potential economic benefit by just becoming more sustainable, and the number of jobs that can be created, I think some statistics from IDC was saying, based on the focus in this area, there'll be 65 million jobs. So having said that, we as an industry, we as humanity, we need to evolve, our capabilities in really looking at, enterprises and how do we integrate the business operations, where sustainability is not just a sustainability plan, but it is an absolute organizational business plan that allows and focuses with our heads of state. Having said that, there has to be innovation that's going to make the difference. We can make conscious decisions on which way to go, but there is going to have to be some incredible breakthroughs that we work together from an innovative state. So, yeah, that was a fantastic event. Met a lot of people to hopefully partner and collaborate throughout the world.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like a really inspiring event. In these conferences or these sessions, do they really get to that tactical level to talking about some of this, or they're setting kind of the global stage for what companies and business partners and even consultants like ourselves can focus on in the future? Is that kind of where they sit?
I think they do both. So first they'll set the global stage, and then with respect to tactics, they have different coalitions in almost every countries, whereby participating companies get together to discuss how to achieve these targets. In addition to that, they also have tools that have been launched on their websites, where anybody that is a participating member can download those tools and put it to practice. So by creating these enabling platforms, companies don't have to start reinventing processes or tools. You could just pick it up and begin to work with what is available. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. That was cool. So coming from the event, that kind of sets the global stage for us a little bit. And I want to switch gears a little bit and bring David into the conversation here a little bit. And when we talk about this within an SAP context as well, we're really talking about, okay, how do we run, right? How do we run SAP in a sustainable manner? How do we set up our operations to be able to do this? And I think a lot of your manufacturing backgrounds, that's kind of where you've focused within this space. So you want to talk a little bit more about kind of the operations side of how SAP is set up to do this?
Yes, Jonathan. So I think if I may sort of talk about it in three stages. First, to be honest, I know you guys are quite involved with SAP, and I'm happy to. Edmund, you're probably the first one I've met who was involved in SAP from R2 days. When I got in, R3 was supposed to be ancient, and we were at the next level, the ECC5, I believe. So, so the pure joy of the discovery of the SAP solution. It was a nightmare for some, I would say many of us, because it forces you to structure and rethink your whole operation. You cannot sort of load whatever your legacy system and that stuff onto SAP and run. So one of the things a few of us quickly realized, so I was there with some decent background in IT, and another guy who had just come back from 2-3 years stint at JP Morgan in New York in analytics. So few of us, although we did not know anything about SAP, pretty soon we realized what it can do, and the opportunity it gives for really re-engineering your workflow. So I would say that's what some of us, including myself, focused on right from the beginning in enabling the operations and the ground level people on that. So it was quite a wish list at the beginning, and the consultants were able to do some of it. But to be fair, why, as you will know, a lot of the SAP installations sort of end up in a lot of heartburn in the early days, right? You cannot get anything done. And why do I have to do A, B, and C? I used to do it with one click. But that's the cost you pay for a solid, for the solid integrity of the system, which you realize the benefits later. So we stuck with that. And in the process, we upskilled our core team and got them good reading material, and then really went on to a situation because it was interesting. There were about 6-7 companies in Sri Lanka around that time, some big garment manufacturers, all of them export companies. another manufacturer of, I think, heavy-duty tires, including aircraft tires. What we saw was all of them were sort of regressing into a finances-only mode and letting go of the operational structures that were set up in SAP. So in crude terms, it became a matter of do with your paper and pencil whatever you want to write. End of the day, somebody puts the transactions in SAP. So we decided not to go that route, but to keep to the original vision. And then, and remember, printing is a different business. It's not make to stock, it's make to order. And within that comes a lot of challenge. Every job, it has its variants. And the print process itself it doesn't always go in a neat pattern from machine A to B to C to D. Sometimes you do some work in machine A, jump to C, come back to A for little more work, and then go to D. So I would say, if I may say a few key points that we did well and succeeded. One thing I really push for is giving the freedom and the agency for the operational people to take ownership of their transactions and the numbers. So something that I used to quote is we give this $500,000 to $1 million worth of machines. Every job you put like 10, 20, sometimes $30,000 worth of ink and paper. And once it comes out of the machine, there is no control Z, you cannot undo. And if we are trusting them with that, why can't we trust them with production confirmation, with flow stock management, with stock movement transaction? Because if these guys are given that ownership, they will do it well rather than interspersing somebody else into that. That went so well that our quarterly stock count and reconciliation, which used to have, I cannot give absolute numbers, but can I say, which used to be sometimes even 10 or slightly touching 10% of the quarterly turnover, that kind of corrections, it came down to a fraction. And then people realized this is the benefit of suffering the pain in the early days of SAP. It puts a straitjacket on you. You cannot do any transaction unless you have, and until you have defined your masters and all the rules and all that, and give the operational transactions to the people who are actually doing the production. So I would say that worked very well, quite counterintuitive, because the general thing is these guys who run machines, how do they teach? How do we teach them SAP? It's better to give them, pen and paper and jot down whatever. But we know that things have a way of averaging out over the day, right? So we may have wasted 20% material in one job and only 5% in the other, but end of the day, it all comes down to the average because you are not entering then and there. So I would say that was the biggest challenge in the beginning, and I'm happy that we stayed on message and pushed it so that it became people took the ownership. I would say, although we did not realize at the time, eventually when the sustainability program started coming in, and still more in an aspiration mode than so much a full-blown implementation, we realized the benefits, because how do you measure? So you improve on only what you can measure, right? So if you haven't learned how to measure for efficiency, to reduce wastage 10 years ago, not so much with sustainability in mind, but with the bottom line in mind. But it's the same rule. And once people know the tools, know the methodology, have got the discipline, then it transfers pretty well into the sustainability goal and the process to achieve them as well.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because even just a couple of years ago, we ran into a customer where, we were walking through the manufacturing plant and we saw, exactly as you described, right? The 4 or 5 people working in SAP, nowhere near the manufacturing floor, and people would run pieces of paper back and forth and saying, okay, now that I've used this material, I've used this, here's what numbers, you go enter it into SAP. So it was exactly that, and we were able to get some quality management systems in place and a little bit more real-time tracking with devices on the plant floor that we could actually do this real-time and get those KPIs as they happened versus maybe, oh, I forgot to enter something from yesterday, what piece of paper was that on, and then it gets lost, right? But yeah, in implementing SAP, back and forth, it's all about that initial integration, right? And if you're wanting to use SAP for all of its benefits, that integration piece is really where everything lies. And so, kind of sticking with that for just a minute, a lot of the sustainability topics are really taking full steam right now, but you hit it on the head at the end there, where people and companies and corporations are very worried about bottom line, and wastage and efficiency measures have been a huge part of how do I manufacture better and how do I do it with less materials, right? If I don't have to buy as many raw materials, then obviously my bottom line increases. And that's being taken forward to the next step these days that says this is now also something that I can track to make sure that I'm being corporately responsible as well for what I use and what I waste. And that, I think, is the big key now, and the big change of being able to try to track that, right? So it's just a huge area. But yeah, any other comments on that topic before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, again, just comments from both of you so far. I mean, yes, we got to do our business. We got to run our operations. We're focusing on our customers, just as we are. But, coming again from, where your comment of you have to be able to measure it to make any decision process, right? Where even though, we started out, hey, a lot of people have aspirational goals. Here's your United Nations goal for energy usage, our goal for efficiencies of becoming, choosing, reducing carbon emissions. But you really need to embed what is now becoming the universal standard of the CO2 equivalent for greenhouse gases within each of the business process. So, again, coming back from how do you embed, just like you would embed a machine hour calculation for that line unit. How do you embed, the raw material aspect to that production cycle? How do you embed an overhead calculation, just like what we did in product costing, where you're looking at what are those, the bill of material and the routings behind that. You need to embed a very specific CO2e emission factor to every aspect to that. And that's why it's, just as what David mentioned, it's hard changing your process. But if you don't embed that, then you're allowing decisioning to be made at the lowest line of, hey, I don't know anything about how green a certain raw material is based on 100 different vendors. You need to be able to automate the capability to, one, embed that measure, but to know it's the right place to put it. So that's some of the challenges. So yeah, we have aspirational goals, but now it gets down to the tactics. How do you actually do it? And what I'm finding is that, again, really focus on our customers. Everybody wants to do it, but it's a static, they measure, here's where we are on overall usage. It kind of trends out for the quarter, it kind of trends out for a certain period, but it's not real time. The only way you can do it is to actually embed it into the enterprise, embed it just like you would and that's why in ERP and for that matter, the whole integration or the intelligent enterprise aspects where everything is pervasive. That's the only way we can really make the decisions. And then only from there, we can source properly, we can source to get more efficient, more green, embed the green line. But having said that, from a customer focus, we've also, some of the recent studies have also said if you don't do that and you're not acting socially responsible, you're actually going to lose your client. So there's actually a risk factor out there where you're going to lose your client base. So it's not just where you're buying it, it's actually the downstream aspects of that in the whole supply chain that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. More as we get into looking at that supply chain early on, for example, if I'm looking to buy raw materials, I'm needing to look at a lot of vendors, and I'm needing to do vendor evaluation. So how is that something that we capture via KPIs, or how do we measure, or how do we partner with those vendors that we want to in those spaces?
Okay, I'll speak about this, because even for you to do things in this space, first you need to identify your value chain, to find out from the beginning of the process who are the stakeholders involved, and for step by step to the end of the process, who are the stakeholders, and what is also the positive or negative impact of carrying out your business. And by the time you've identified the positive and the negative impacts, you find out you'll have to also look at who are involved in this process. So for example, if I look at maybe a sugar manufacturing company, a simple value chain will start from agriculture, which is the farm. It goes into inbound logistics, gets to production, outbound logistics, and it gets to the customer. So you could see that about 5 people or 5 stops involved in that value chain. And there are people or systems involved in each of those blocks. So if you look at agriculture, for example, you start looking at the farmers. And when you look at the farmers, first you're looking at their labor conditions. And we've had instances of people, in some cases, using child labor. In some cases, people not being paid fairly, or working long hours. So these are your stakeholders. What processes are you putting in place to reduce the occurrences of such things? But aside from the, human interventions, or the human aspect, you also have the climate aspect as well. So at the farms, what kind of agriculture and pesticides do they use? What kind of fertilizers they use? And how does this impact on the environment and the climate as a whole? And for you to move things forward in this discussions, you need to work together with the people in this field. So you need to have first design a process, then you build in templates that would ask specific questions to some of these issues, and come up with a strategy to address these issues. And especially in the agricultural field, it's not something that corporates can go alone. So you have industry coalitions coming up together to address such issues as a group. Then moving on from the agriculture into the customer space, you still have the same issues about welfare and work conditions for people, and also things around about climate and environment degradation. So for example, in taking your products to the consumer, what kind of transportation is used? Is this something that contributes a lot to carbon emissions? And what is your plan to measure it, or to become carbon neutral in that aspect? Even for the people that work in that area, what process have you put in place, or as organizations put in place, to make sure that these people get their wages paid on time or are treated well? So what we do working with vendors is, first of all, we have to check that our contracts are clear to what the common objective is. So if, for example, you have like a contract that says in maybe cultivating, for example, maybe cocoa for us, these are the rules you have to follow. You have to use this kind of pesticide that attains to this standard. You have to make sure that your staff have XYZ. So once the contract speaks to those things, then you can begin to check and you can also begin to measure. Because if you do not have the standard, then you'll not be checking against anything, and you just build talk. So first is for us to create that standard, and then we start measuring our achievements against the standard. And in areas where there are differences or where there are gaps to close, we work together with the vendors to try to close those gaps. And as we are all aware, this is an ongoing process. So it's not like I tick the box today and it is over. It is something that we have to continue to evaluate to make sure that all the things we are doing is in line with our plans. So working hand in hand, supporting the vendors, coming up with standards, measuring the standards, it's an ongoing journey. And I think it's something that we'll have to keep doing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I imagine, that was great. I imagine along with this, in the past, this has been really hard to evaluate, right? We're not capturing all the right things to make these decisions from a vendor or a customer perspective. And I think, Edmund, David, as we go forward, the more data we can capture at each of these different stakeholder points, and the more KPIs we put together around how we're doing our decision making, really sets the stage for, okay, what can we capture? At what stage can we capture it? So we can make very valid decisions on where we want to source, how we want to produce, and then how we want to actually get our customers involved. So it's very interesting, because I think that end-to-end value chain you mentioned is really the key to this whole circular economy.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on that, I mean, to Emete's point of standards and compliance, and again, putting the comparison to, IFRS standards and GAAP standards for us in the US, and how to manage your, accounting. It is just evolving, what are the global standards of how to measure? What are our, new currency? What's our new unit of measure? And that's how I'm looking at it. So when we absolutely are following the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I've been really focused on climate change and, UN SDG 13. And then really looking at United Nations, kind of how do you manage scope 1, scope 2, scope 3? I won't go through that in any detail, but scope 1, I look at just the basics. What type of energy usage? Where is our supply chain with our vendors? What is that raw material? And then stamp it into our material masters. Well, how does that get embedded? SAP did launch, recently their SAP product carbon footprint solution, where you're able to embed that and, look at some of the disparate environments to bring in, what is that then? Some of the work that I've been working with and focusing on and, leveraging some of the SAP BTP solutions is really trying to integrate all these potential data sources. What chemical, what are that emissions per kilogram? What is that? And again, some of the aspects of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, what kind of sensors, how do you actually measure that? Are we going to, integrate with some of the IoT sensing devices, or are we relying on kind of external standards, very similar to like syndicated data back in the day, that this chemical is measured at? So there's a lot of different data sources that we want to be able to integrate via CPI or APIs, these 3 or 4 or 5 potential different data sources for the same chemical. And then from there, use our kind of like a technology neural network data hub, where we're basically either one to look at different ranges of if you use this methodology, it's going to be this type of carbon emission. If we combine it, or are we averaging those into this material? Either way, I want to be able to give a directional saying, hey, it's a no-brainer, go with this one with high confidence level. And again, using a lot of econometrics and statistics to use that, using, automated machine learning aspects to tell you, well, this is better than not. Nothing is going to be exact right now, and we all have to mature in the process. But again, just embedding that into the process, Emete, to your point of the transportation, inbound and outbound transportation, those are all the kind of the building blocks of how to manage that process. And, over time, we're all going to become much more mature. And I'm finding some companies very mature, but the high majority of companies are really just focusing on scope 1 and scope 2 and they're designing. And there's some major things we can do to help that, or at least I hope we can help that.
Yeah, I think we definitely can. And, from my software background, even, we're building everything in the SAP BTP platform. And it just seems to start to make a lot of sense with all these disparate data sources that you mentioned, Edmund, around, where is my LCA data coming for these type of products, or what's my CO2e for what we've measured in this raw material. There didn't seem to be in our research, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there didn't seem to be like a central repository for any of those types of things. And that's where something, as cloud-based, as open as SAP BTP could really possibly come into play there, where we can capture things from a lot of different areas to make sure that all of that is together and we're making decisions on the best data that we possibly can.
And I'm finding that, GRI is probably becoming, the leader in this space as far as kind of accreditation and kind of standards behind how this is measured. So I think that's really one of the first organizations we're aligning to. And, as we started out, it starts with kind of the heads of state down to, there's very, SAP is, of course, one of the most active organizations in leading, enabling companies. But again, a lot of policy, a lot of decisioning behind it is key. And then the standardization behind, what we're coming. But I'm going to contend there's going to be multiple data points to make the decision. So just like, are we looking at it based on this parallel ledger kind of concept where, we're looking at it from this type of methodology, but if we flip it to this side, it's a parallel view of it. And I think that's some of the, the capabilities that we all need.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to bring, go ahead, Emete.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to highlight more on the issue of on the topic of reporting, because like Edmund has mentioned, we have several reporting bodies, and I believe as we go forward on this journey, we need to harmonize this reporting body. So, for example, in Europe and I would say most parts of Africa, a lot of us use the GRI reporting tool, and from time to time it's it's evolving. And if, for example, I'm operating in America, would that tool be accepted? And even when you look at quoted stock exchange, or rather stock exchanges, in their quest to make sure that corporates become more sustainable, they have different guidelines for companies to comply to. So, for example, the guidelines at the New York Stock Exchange may be different from that of the London Stock Exchange. And we need to harmonize this reporting tools. And I think that's one of the things that the United Nations Global Compact is working on, so that they would have a reporting tool that everybody can use going forward. So we hope that when this is launched in the nearest future, I think sometime next year, then we can say, okay, this is perhaps the global standard. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't know that each stock exchange had, possibly different rules and different techniques of looking at all this. So it's good that we're taking that on from more of a collective perspective. That's great. So yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah. May I add a word to that what Emete said, and it's quite important, as you said, Emete, that we sort of converge around some common set of standards. Because what I have observed in the last couple of years in our part of the world where a lot of the production happens, right? It is not just China, but Southeast Asia, everywhere. So the choice of that reporting framework is led by the brand owners in Europe, generally in the West. And there are very sort of powerful subgroupings within them. So some of the large production entities in printing as well as various other product vendor facilities, they are kind of forced to comply to more than one. So you may have a big customer in UK who wants something and somebody else in the US wants something else. So the good thing is that it's vendor driven. So the guys here take the effort to learn what it is and implement it. But the problems they have is that there aren't enough resource people in this region yet to properly advise them. And there is a great need is coming up. But on the other hand, it will definitely help if there is some convergence that begins to happen now, because as you know, many of you said here, there's quite a lot of overlap already, right? And we are beginning to see that. And as they expand their scope, we actually see more and more overlap. So that will help the production enterprises in this part of the world greatly.
Yeah, and it's, you know, sticking with the more of the data and analytics topic here, it really makes sense to attempt to be collective about this, right? It's not a, you know, we're a North American based company and here's how we operate versus we're in you know, an Asia Pac based company and here's how we operate and here's how we track these statistics. It's a good thing that the UN is trying to look at this from a larger perspective to say, look, here's some global standards that we can all get accustomed to. And, you know, in speaking to some of those reporting capabilities, I think that's exactly where Edmund's starting to focus and to say, okay, here's what we've learned, here's what we've researched, here's what the UN is focused on, here's how we bring some of those data and analytics pieces or KPIs that we can track into all SAP customers, really.
Yeah, that's a great point there. I mean, again, there's standards, and then, you know, bringing up the concept of banking is absolutely critical here. So, you know, if you're following the bond market right now, you know, there's a lot of new launches of sustainability measures and alignments around the bond market behind it. So having said that, you know, there's trillions of dollars to be made for companies to become more sustainable. So if you're just looking at the profitability aspect and efficiency aspect, that's there. But you know, going back to some of these reporting, you know, again, really critical getting the data sources and compiling that. Again, the same version of truth still comes into play here, right? But what do we actually need to file? What do we need to, you know, spending a large part of my career in compliance. There's different standards across the world, different kinds of reporting, different views of the same data, right? So again, you got to get it right from the source. But in sustainability, companies are not just doing their traditional 10Ks and your income statement P&Ls. Everyone is actually now going with the integration report. So if you start looking at least in the United States, the companies that are Fortune 500, they're actually publishing an integration report. And a big part of that integration report will be sustainability. So what I'll contend, some of the most complicated parts of any kind of reporting is the disclosures, the exact disclosures, XYZ form and format, and what type of data, and kind of that you know, the subjective, objective aspect of those disclosures. So again, getting these disparate sources, the view of GSSB versus GRI perspective, and having the appropriate disclosures is going to be absolutely critical in an integration that's embedded with social values. Executives of most companies are now compensated by how sustainability gets embedded in your process. So again, that, that's kind of the best thing I've heard, is that compensation's tied to the highest level to be how you act. So I think that's going to be a big driver for compliance in a sustainable world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Go ahead, Emete.
Yeah, it's not just the executives that get compensated. I could remember a few years ago when we started embedding sustainability in our organization. It was actually part of the work plan for a lot of executives. So your bonus is tied to it. But then it has moved from just executives. Now for young people, as part of considering an organization to work for, they begin to ask questions with respect to what is your sustainability ambition? What are you doing with respect to climate change, or with respect to people and the rest of it? So young people ask these questions, and as a company, for you to continue to attract the right talent into your organization, information or disclosure on what you do in this aspect is very, very, very vital. And also, consumers are becoming more enlightened on about sustainability issues. So, for example, brands are being forced to put on their labeling information, as in that there's some chocolates now that you see clearly on that label that this is sourced from child labor, is not used in this process. And it's clearly indicated on that labeling. And more awareness is being created, and people check for those things when they want to purchase. It might not be 100% now, but there's a movement that has started taking place. And for any forward-looking organization, you have to put processes in place to address both the climate, the environment, the social, and the human rights goals. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, as we go forward, I heard an interesting thing. So I had the chance to visit the App House Network lead in Heidelberg last week, and they actually added a new X. There's user experience, there's customer experience, there's an employee experience, and then now they put another one on the board, which was LX, and it's life experience. And I like that one a lot, because it kind of came full circle into, okay, I'm an employee and I care, and I'm having a great user experience, and I'm having a nice employee experience, but I'm also living my life around this, right? I'm bringing that into my corporate culture, and I'm bringing this decision making from, exactly like you said, a young person's perspective that is very, very worried about the future, which we all are now. And so this makes it such an important topic, and such a great topic to talk about.
And the interesting thing there is young people all over the world, right? It's not the young people in the West or the developed countries, but every single country, because there is very little difference between the 20-somethings in our time compared to our parents or grandparents' time. So, and then I can say that because as part of, before Brandkey, the founders of Brandkey, we started a company called GMI back in 2008. And as part of that, I used to do factory audits in different countries. So I've done, I think, about 40 factories in 8 countries, including like Europe, like Spain, Italy, and so on. And then Pakistan, Bangladesh, even Turkey on this side, Indonesia. And it's the same. And what I usually like to do is during the lunchtime, I try to grab the people in quality department and production heads and all, and sit for lunch with them, and then sort of chat them over. And I find, Emete, what you said exactly. They are solidly looking at, that is this the company that I want to work for? They value it quite well. I've seen it all over, from Indonesia to all the way up to Spain and Italy, right through Turkey and all those places.
Yeah. I think this is a great place to kind of wrap up for today. This is an amazing topic. I've had such fun talking to you all about it. I think we could probably go on for another couple hours here. We'll let our listeners have a little break here, but I would very much enjoy to continue this conversation. We'll perhaps schedule a part 2 of this and even dig in a little bit deeper. But on behalf of me and Edmund, of course, love chatting to you today. Thanks a lot. I'll let each person kind of give, if you want to give a minute of a final thought on the topic, and we can say our goodbyes. I think Edmund, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, there's a new Paul Paulson. He was the Unilever CEO, chairman for many years, and now really leading kind of this from an executive coalition of some of the largest companies there. So I like seeing all the large companies' leadership make this a priority. And then I also, again, being here in Seattle, we have, the Melinda Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and some of the things with breakthrough energy and where that's going. So again, getting a global movement is absolutely critical, but there has to be new innovation to have a chance. So, when you look at the media out there, it's very scary. And some of the things we can do with just existing technology is not enough. So we're hoping the young children and young folk are going to innovate constantly, because that we absolutely need it.
David, how about yourself?
Yeah, as Edmund said, I do hope that innovation will continue, especially with the young generation, because they, I would say, believe that this can be done more than people of my generation do, that this is doable. So that's a good thing. And one other thing that I noticed, because I'm again thinking back to when I started with SAP implementation back in 2006, compared to that time, the cloud technology that eventually came to maturity is there. The tools are there. And in our company, Bragg, we are, while I'm involved with others, building a system of reporting that we discussed. So we are trying to create a very wide platform where all kinds of reporting methodologies can be accommodated at the moment. The great thing I see is that the analytics tools are available, they are cheap, and we have a new generation of people coming in believing that this is doable. So I would say there is a great role for some of us who have been in the industry to mentor and develop those talents. I'm also thinking to a documentary that I saw recently when Apollo 11 was successful.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody looked at the average age in mission control and generally in NASA, and it was, I think, 23 or 24 years. Because they could do it because they believed that it was possible, and they did it. And as probably, people grow older, they might become cynical and they know too many things that can go wrong and all that. So I echo very much what you said, Edmund, that this is doable in our lifetime, and hope we will see that unrolling, especially with the governments getting together to put the policies in place.
Thank you. And Emete, I'll give you the last word here.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, for me, for a last word, I would like to speak that sustainability should be embedded as part of doing the business. It should not just be a stand-alone activity. So for every decision that we take as business leaders, we should look at the implication on sustainability. And as we go by, even as individuals, in the little decisions we make or we take in our personal lives, we should always ask ourselves, how does this impact on the environment? How does this impact on the society? And also, how does this impact on the people around me? Because like they say, little drops of water makes an ocean. So on this journey, little steps together collectively will make us achieve great results. And speaking about technology as well, we should continue to embrace technology and also see how we can use technology to drive some of these initiatives that we carry out. Thank you.
It's a beautiful way to say it. Thank you so much. I think that does it for us today. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for listening to the Mindset Nebula, and we will be back soon with some more great guests. Thank you again, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.